with all of the experience that I have with my first show, A Place to Call Home, I'm coming up with my second show, and I call it Shack Tales. The title taking from this little 1930s squatter shack that I live in the heart of Yellowknife's Old Town, and where I've raised my family for the last 20 years. It's pretty much a sequel to A Place to Call Home, in that I pick up my story from the time when my children were born right through to the time when they leave home. And I sort of ask myself a question of well, where am I at now, and where do I go from here? Here's the big picture. Here's all the pieces of the story or the different stories that I have. And placing them right in the middle of the mural. And a huge part of that is just sort of making sure that, I don't know, that the picture is covered that way. And then also in this next part as well, just sort of trying to interlink all of these stories to just make sure that the connection is sort of full, as opposed to maybe there's one section that has a whole bunch of stuff in another section that doesn't. So just trying to make sure that the picture is sort of homogeneous all the way out. And again, just a visualization of the show and what I'm going to be speaking about as well. So 46 years I've lived in this town. 23 of those years in this 562 square foot squatter shack. Now I know it's 562 square feet because I measured it one day when I had a day off in between jobs. The nature of the show is that it's a collection of stories. There's numerous stories, and they kind of bounce around all over the place. But there's almost like a weaving effect that sort of happens as well. And there's an interlude section sort of in between each one. Because what good is a revolution if you can't dance, right? And that's where I'd be. It cannot be denied just the emotional stimulus that the music will bring to a certain piece. And it's always been a goal of mine to be able to strike the balance between the music and the spoken word, and to get them to complement and to support each other. The first time you looked deep into my eyes, forgot my And so, you know, just getting the narrative down, because that's more or less going to be fixed. There's the story. That's what I'm going to be talking about. That's what I'm going to be speaking from the stage or when I'm telling you the story. But the part that really can float is the music that way. Well, if Pete Racine were alive today, he'd be amazed to see his building still standing after 72 years. Once it settles in and I get comfortable with it, I can be bringing in some of those other stories that maybe didn't even make this cut. If I start to talk about my heater, or I'm talking about the roof, or I'm talking about a season, or something like that, I can bring in another story into that. And likewise with the music that way, to just sort of keep it just sort of in a sort of state of flux, so that it may never really sort of settle, gauging from audience reaction or what audience I'm performing for, to just sort of try and give them the best representation of the story that I can. Surrounded by rhubarb plants, and wild juniper, gooseberry, fireweed, and rose hips. Yeah, he'd be pleased to see the view of Yellowknife Bay again. Jolliffe Island, Mosher, all the way out to the village of Detta, and the Mirage Islands in the distance. Yeah, he'd be pleased to see Weaver and Devore trading still open and being run by the family. And to see the House of Horrors at the summit of Rock. The Wildcat Cafe on the west side still standing. Oh, he'd be pleased to hear the bush planes, the Cessnas and the otters and the beavers roaring over the shack, trying to catch a lift in a stiff west wind. So Shack Tales combines, you know, my own personal reflections on that history, but also I look on it in the context of the shack where I live, how long it's been around, its history, and also within the community that I grew up in and still live in, and its history, so that I can hopefully find my own answer, so that I can move forward. That was the Weaver and Devore Trading Post. It's home now to Bullock's Fish and Chips Bistro, one of the best fish and chip joints in the country. Deep pan frying the fresh trout and whitefish fillets, just as quickly as a fisherman can fill it up.